In this video, I want to talk about, I had many sessions with this woman since I started coaching her. It's been about a month and a half. And what we had kind of started with was just letting her know, kind of started with some of her behaviors. And somehow, some way, not intentionally, I let her know the different services that I offer and how I work with people. And so she kind of realized and had some self-reflection based on some of the behaviors she was behaving in, and realized, I don't know what she realized, I'll be honest, because I tell my services to everybody, but she was like, can I talk to you? And it ended up being a 2-hour session, so it wasn't just a little talk, it was very needed. She was actually making people go away just so we could have this conversation, and she was very tuned in. Like, she was laser focused on having this conversation with me, and it's been so productive. And I've seen her at least twice a week. We've kind of updated and the progression, because one of the things I told her, this doesn't happen overnight. This is going to take continuous effort, and you got to keep working at it. And I said, the more you work at it, the better it's going to get. And what we're doing is building new neural pathways. So we're replacing bad thoughts with good thoughts. And we are regulating the nervous system. And she's made huge, huge progress, even just in a month and a half. And it's because she's actively and consciously working on it every day. And so when I first started working with her, like I said, she kind of was like, I need to have this conversation with you. And so when we first started talking, I kind of explained to her what my services are and what, I was able to help with. And so immediately right off the bat, we started uncovering she has split personality. Not uncommon. It's actually much more common than you think. That would be your cluster your cluster B personality traits. And so that's not uncommon. I'm very, very familiar with it. But with that, it's a little more challenging because, number one, they have to admit there's something wrong in order for somebody to actually want to help themselves. And so that's what I kind of discussed right off the bat. I said, I do offer services, but I said, it's up to you of whether you want to make them effective or not. And so with that, and I'm going to try to talk fast because I want to try to put it in one video, but I really don't want to miss any parts. But I told her, you have to admit it. And so the other part is when we are speaking, I said I will only speak with the name that she goes by. So she has her biological name, her full name, and that's not who she likes. That's the other personality that don't have good intentions and don't a lot of aggression and negative thoughts. And then the name that she goes by, that she shortens it by, is who the other personality is, and that's who we're doing the coaching with. And so I told her I will not coach her biological name because it won't be effective. I said, but I will coach the name that you go by. And that's how you have to work with split personalities, because part of them says, I'm not going to help myself. The other part says, please help me. And so I told her I will only work with the personality that says, please help me. That way we can make it effective. And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to start rebuilding neural pathways, and we're going to start regulating the nervous system. And so with that first session was about 2 hours long. And I just let her talk. I really didn't say a whole lot. I just listened and let her volunteer anything that she wanted to bring up. And so as she did that, what we started uncovering, because she painted her life as perfect. Like, I had all my needs met. I never had any problems. There was just never no issues. But that is actually a very big red flag to me, because everybody has some sort of trauma or experience that they've gone through. It's just part of being human and lessons and learning and evolving and growing. But that doesn't, just everybody has this perfect life. So right off the bat I knew, okay, so there's kind of one red flag. And so that's where I kind of explained to her. I said, you might have perceived life being perfect. I said, but obviously there was something else that you weren't getting, because that's where these behaviors come into play. And so we were talking about some of the behaviors that she was behaving at the time that we started this initial interaction. And so going over those behaviors, we realized those were a wiring within her nervous system reaching for something that she wasn't getting. So even though her perception was my life was perfect, we started uncovering the needs that weren't actually met, that she was not realizing. And those are the things that were affecting her and creating those behaviors now. So once we kind of realized that one of her biggest needs was she was never heard. So no matter how picture perfect her life was, she was never being heard. So some of these things, she spoke really loudly. She had a lot of aggression. That's where kind of that split personality comes in. Probably praised by one parent and emotionally neglected by the other. So there's a lot of, like I said, she might have perceived it as perfect, but there was a lot that played into who she is today. And so that first session, she was kind of blown away. She was like, I feel different, she said. And it was because we actually started finding that inner child, and the main focus and problem she had was she wasn't being heard. So she had other therapists and people that she worked with, and her parents and, different things that happened in her life, but she never really felt heard, if that makes sense. So by me just sitting there listening, letting her volunteer information, and then uncovering, she never really felt heard. She actually felt heard for once. And so that completely transformed and flipped the dynamic on our first session. She actually finally, for once in her life, felt heard. So that already put a good initial start in the foundation of what we're working with. And then after that, I've seen her like twice a week for the last month and a half. And we've done just little follow-ups, and that second one after that, even though the first one was so good and it made such a difference, here goes that split. That second one was like, it's not going to work. Never worked before. Why would it work now? That's the one that's the personality I will not coach, because it will not be effective. So, second session, she was in her biological name personality, and that's where she was like, this ain't going to work. So, not effective. We're not going to actually work on coaching. After that, I've seen her several times, and today she said, my husband caught me, because we're regulating nervous system. She's been so much more calm. She's starting to realize she's more of her name she goes by versus her biological name that she don't like, and she's regulating. So she's creating new neural pathways and regulating that nervous system by reflecting. And so we've done a lot of little tactics, and I'm running out of time in between. But her message to me today was, I sat there in silence for a little while, and my husband asked me if I was okay, and she said I was totally okay, but I didn't have anything to describe what I was feeling. And I told her, I said, that's what it should feel like. That's a regulated nervous system, and you're so used to and dysregulated that when you were actually calm and regulated, you couldn't find a word to describe it. So, thoughts have been better, nervous system's been so much more calmer, and she has made strides in just a month and a half by finding out what her base needs are, inner child work, than just medications and surface level